Hello, and welcome to Chapter 18, Social Media Marketing. Today, in this chapter, we're going to talk all about different social media, different platforms for social media. We're going to talk about different earned media and owned media, and those types of things as we move through. We're also going to talk about blogs. We're going to talk about social networking sites like Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat. We're going to talk about Pinterest and other types of sharing sites as well as video sites like YouTube. Emily Risch is going to take the whole chapter for us, and she's going to walk you through not only the different types of social media marketing, but also some metrics for social media marketing, target markets for social media marketing, and how to evaluate social media marketing. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Emily with social media marketing.
Hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Carol from Big Cat Rescue. Just kidding. What do you think this is? Hey guys. What's up? It's me. I'm taking the whole lecture today. Plot twist. Today we're talking about social media marketing, which is my jam, because as some of y'all know, I run the social media accounts for the School of Business. So the plug, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at SJFC Business. And LinkedIn, too. Okay, let's get rocking. So, social media is all about creating conversations on the internet. So there's a couple different ways that you can do that besides traditional social networking sites, which I'll get into a bit later in the lecture. But the main thing to remember is how to facilitate a conversation with your consumers about your product, about your brand, about really anything. And then, so social media is a really unique tool because it has a huge impact because of the large amount of users that exist on the different social media platforms, but you also sometimes have little control over what people are posting about your company. So you can't really control what kind of photos you get tagged in or what comments you see. You can delete them, but someone can always take a screenshot. The internet is forever. And it's really hard for companies to control consumer responses to what is posted on their social media and what consumers post about them that they're mentioned in. It stays with them. You can't control it. Sad. And then the metrics are also super unique, and there's a ton of them. So, and they're very unique to social media. Like if you have an ad on Instagram, there's so many different avenues that you can go from that specific ad. You can go to the profile, you can follow the account, you can like the photo, you can go to the website, you can scroll on the profile, you can comment on the post, you can share it to your story. There's just a ton of different avenues that can all be measured, and they can all be significant depending on what your goals are, which I'll get into later. Another huge impact of social media is the global scale that it now has, since everyone around the world has a smartphone, and you can even access a lot of social networking sites from computers. So you don't even necessarily need a smartphone to access social media, which expands the scope so greatly. Like it used to be, you can only access people who read a certain newspaper or drive on a certain road that has a billboard or watch a certain TV show. But social media's scope is so large that it's sometimes hard to pick a certain focus that is what's going to be best for a company's objectives. So social media users typically want to exchange information and collaborate and have conversations with typically other consumers, but they will get engaged with businesses on social media as well. And it's really up to those businesses to decide which conversations to engage in and if that's going to be profitable and cost effective, and find the most effective way to enter those conversations. It is pretty easy for social media to be cost effective because it's not that difficult to get organic engagement depending on what kind of content you have. So you don't necessarily have to pay for like all of the boosters that are offered on social media, and even if you do, they're usually pretty low cost depending on what your scope of your area is. And then, so the consumers on social media depends on a lot of stuff. Age, demo, psycho, generations. There's a ton of different factors that go into it. A lot of platforms fade in and out of popularity. You know, Twitter used to be really popular back a couple of years ago, and now it's kind of fading. I still like Twitter, but that's just me. And then platforms are sometimes kind of obsolete, like a MySpace, or I think Flickr disappeared completely, actually. And then, so some different uses: young adult singles, Match.com is considered a social media as well as OkCupid. I know y'all all are on Tinder, so don't even lie. And then teens, or really Gen Zs, are on like Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok is the new craze. And then usually older millennials and adults use Facebook. Sometimes there's blurs in there, like I've seen some more older millennials and adults on Instagram, and I think that number is growing. Like my boyfriend's grandma has an Instagram. So it really just depends. Like it's not clear cut for a lot of age groups. I think the numbers are changing. I think some young people are still on Facebook, but that's not the first social media that they go to, whereas it used to be kind of their first social media account that you created. And then I think I get into this later, but it's important to know that videos are the most popular tool to use because they get the most engagement, they get the most views, usually the most likes and comments. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Social commerce. Fun. When I think of social commerce, I think of something like Poshmark because it includes having like followers, and you can like, comment, and share on someone's posting on Poshmark. Whereas something like eBay, it's just buyers interacting with each other only to buy the item. It's not, you don't like follow someone on eBay. You just kind of search for the item that you want, and then you come up with it. But if you like someone's closet on Poshmark, you can follow them, see what kind of stuff they're posting. Y'all can follow me on Poshmark if you want. And then another example of this is the shopping feature on Instagram, where it like comes up with like the little shopping bag icon, and you can like tap on it and like go to the item on the website. That is another example of social commerce, even though it's not a specific platform. It's on a different platform. But it's a really cool feature. Ratings and recommendations are super important. I'll get into that later as well. And yeah, power of information that comes from reviews and recommendations. Different types of social I don't need to get into this. Usefulness of social media. Big thing here is it's due to the amount of users. The conversations have switched to one-to-many to many-to-many. And I think a good example of this is companies that are more on a global scale. They'll have different accounts based on the country that they're trying to communicate to and the language that they're trying to communicate in. So a company like BuzzFeed, they have their like tasty food accounts on Instagram and Facebook. They have different accounts. Like I think they have one for Spanish-speaking audiences, and then I think they have one for Portuguese-speaking audiences in Brazil. So that's kind of an example of picking the content that you're pushing out to your different markets, because food is something that's different around the globe. So they use different accounts to do that, but that makes it kind of hard to maintain some consistency across your platforms, which crowdsourcing also plays into that. So that's using consumers to develop and market your product. So it could be a complete outsourcing of a whole campaign. Sometimes companies have done contests where they look for marketing ideas on social media and they'll use them on their platforms, even though sometimes it might not be the most on-brand thing for them. So they go a little away from their consistency, which might not be the best thing in the world, but it's a good way to still engage consumers in what you're doing online and make them a part of the conversation. Okay, media types. So owned media, you have the most autonomy over because it's what you're actually posting. It is your presence on social platforms, your specific accounts on these platforms, whereas earned media is that content that's being shared by other people. So it's word of mouth, it's online buzz, it's any type of mention of you in like a blog or something that you don't control. You don't pay for it. You could pay for it with like an influencer or something, but you usually don't. It's usually earned. And then paid media is typically not on social networks, but it's still online. So like display ads, SEO, paid search, and then direct online ads. The listening system. So I'll get into the different stages in making a social media plan later, but this is the first stage, the listening system. And you really want to either seek feedback from your consumers on what they want to see from you in a social media campaign, or pay attention to what kind of comments they're leaving. And with comment monitoring, you can do text mining on certain keywords on posts or comments from consumers, which is really, really important to do kind of like a sentiment analysis. Okay, so some social media objectives you want to keep in mind when you're doing a plan is listening and learning, building relationship and awareness, and promoting products and services. So you can translate all of these objectives into more specific SMART goals and tactics. So it's really about what metrics and what KPIs you're specifically trying to use to accomplish these objectives. So, like I mentioned in the last slide, listening is super important. You can develop a listening strategy, because sometimes if you aren't listening and you're not responding to some criticisms that are happening in your social media audience, it can be pretty detrimental to what you're trying to do. And then, like I said earlier, social media is all about making conversations and relationships. So engaging in those conversations, both in a larger group setting and in a more personal setting with like direct messages, that really helps your image, especially if you show good customer service on social media. And then a lot of times it just comes down to promoting your product or service on whichever platform you're trying to use. And then another two, managing your reputation. Like I said, listening, responding to comments, and then improving your customer service in things like messages. Okay, evaluating and measuring. So this can really be unique to social media, like I mentioned earlier. Your KPIs can determine what your metrics are going to be. So example of a metric is engagement, and a KPI for engagement could be follows on your page, it could be likes in a week, it could be shares of certain posts, it could be number of comments. There's a number of things that could lead into a larger metric that have smaller KPIs. And then aligning your social media goals with your business objectives is super important, and then assigning kind of a monetary value to KPIs. So what value is more comments on a certain post going to bring you versus how much value are you going to get from follows on your page? That's up to that company to decide how much those mean. Social media metrics, explained in the next slide. Okay, God. Buzz is basically word of mouth that goes back to that earned media that I was talking about earlier. It's how many people are talking about you online, and then Interests, like I said, can be under your owned media. So that is kind of the size of your presence on your social platforms, which you have more control of, if by which you decide to promote your channels, I suppose. And then engagement and participation, like I said, is really determined by interactions, whatever those look like, depending on what kind of platform you're on. And then these are more, they could be outside of social media, like search engine, that's not really within social media. You could probably track Instagram search or Facebook search, but it would be a little bit harder than like a Google. And then influence is reaching influencers, sentiment analysis I talked about, and then website metrics.